Thank you, friends, for tuning in. This is Pastor Larry, and the show is From the Front Lines. This is where you get some training for the battle that is raging. It is raging right now. Today's date, April the 24th, 2020. And I guess if I'm going to give my little talk a title, I would call it The Virus Report, God is Still on the Throne. You know, as we start, we're going to start with some negative stuff, and I'm going to end up with some positive stuff. But it's always interesting to me how the party of the poor loves to live extravagantly. Joe Biden, the presumptive 2020 presidential nominee, spent almost $10,000 on ice cream as a donor gift. Wow. And it wasn't just any ice cream that the campaign shelled out almost 10 grand for. It was Jenny's Splendid Ice Creams, which is the same brand that House Speaker Pelosi showed off in her now infamous interview on the late night show, the party of the poor. Well, that's just a big joke. It really is. They're not the party of the poor. They're the party of destruction. Now, here's adding insult to injury. Nancy Pelosi bragged about the Democrats holding up the stimulus bill. And then, guess what she did? She showed off her locker full of fancy ice cream, which retails for $12 a pint in D.C. Wow. How anybody would vote for people like this could be a deep mystery, but it's not a mystery. You know why they vote for people like this? Because they just hate Donald Trump. That's the reason. Okay, there have been some good things that have come out of the coronavirus pandemic, believe it or not, and here's a very important one. A stunning number of Americans now view China as a threat to the U.S. Thank you, thank you, thank you. It's about time we wake up. Now, be sure I'm not speaking about the Chinese people. I'm speaking about China's leaders, the Chinese Communist Party. These are brutal men and women who are selfish, who are egotistical, who want to control billions of people. This is the spirit of Antichrist. You know, previously a stunning number of Americans were being duped by China. They were warned, our leaders were warned, our Democrat leaders were warned, even Republican leaders were warned, oh, you just hate people. Now, 90% of Americans view China as a threat, and that's really what China is, while just over 60% consider the country a major threat to the United States. And once again, I'm not speaking about Chinese people, but about the wicked government. China really is a major threat to the United States. Let me read from the Pew survey. Quote, economic factors such as job losses to China and the trade deficit remain key concerns for the American public. But other issues, listen to this, including Chinese human rights policies and environmental degradation also worry Americans, close quotes. The poll was conducted between March the 3rd and the 29th. It was the time when Chinese communist officials claimed that the United States Army was responsible for the Wuhan virus. We did it. Let me quote here. Lijian Zhao, Deputy Director of China's Foreign Ministry Information Department, asked, when did patient zero appear in the United States? How many people are infected? What is the name of the hospital? It may be that the U.S. military brought the epidemic to Wuhan. America, you need to be transparent. The United States owes us an explanation, so says China. Well, you know, the Chinese Communist Party has perpetrated all kinds of abuses on the Chinese people. There's a new documentary, One Child Nation, The Truth Beyond the Propaganda. The truth beyond the propaganda. A lot of propaganda. Now that policy has been rescinded, here are some things that have happened as a result of the one-child policy. The overall sex ratio in China became skewed toward males. They were killing all the females. In 2016, there were 33 million more men than women. That's a problem, so they rescinded that stupid policy. You know what happened during that period? It makes me angry. Millions of Chinese parents had to endure forced sterilization and forced abortions. I cannot think of anything more horrible. Can you imagine a forced sterilization? or a forced abortion. Running after a woman, tying her up and giving her an abortion. What an ugly government. I'm glad that Americans have awakened to the danger from communist China. Here's another thing. In families that already had one child, the births of additional children, which was illegal because it was a violation of the one-child policy, those additional children had to be undocumented. I guess what happened? When they grew up, it was very difficult for them to go to school, to get an education, because theoretically they didn't exist, and it was very difficult for them to find work. So if a mother and a father said, we're not going to kill that little baby, that little girl, okay, well, we've got a little girl who's growing up to be a sweet Chinese girl, maybe 12, 13, 14, 15 years of age, but that person can't go to school because theoretically she doesn't exist. You know, when you mess around with the lives of people like this, it always catches up with you. You don't even need God stepping in to bring his hand down, although one of these days he's going to. But you just mess up so bad. You can't outthink God. You can't outmaneuver God. Your foolishness will catch up to you. Here's a true or false question. The coronavirus is a super deadly Satan bug killer that strikes young and old, healthy and unhealthy. True or false? Well, COVID-19 has been treated like a dreaded killer that is decimating millions, a merciless disease, a Satan bug. Well, there's a new study released by the Journal of the American Medical Association found that 94% of the people hospitalized in the New York City hospital system had underlying conditions. So, you know, like I've said, people do die, no question about it. But we often hear how many people have died from the coronavirus, and some have, but hardly anything about the thousands who have recovered. New York State Governor Andrew Cuomo has conceded that radical and sweeping statewide quarantine orders may not have been the most effective strategy to combat the coronavirus. He said this, "We closed down everything. That was our health strategy." Now, this is the third statement, the third day in a row when the governor questioned this draconian approach to dealing with COVID-19. I'm glad he's waking up. I hope his views on the existence of God change before it's too late. In other words, he was saying putting thousands of people out of work, killing the economy, may not have been such a good idea. Well, I'm glad he's finally coming around to that. And I might add, criticizing President Trump, who is trying to jumpstart the economy, is also not a good idea, because more and more Americans are realizing that some of the draconian and unequally enforced policies to lock down everything has been rather wicked and evil. Governor Cuomo mentioned a study by Dr. Katz, or Katz, K-A-T-Z, at Yale University, quote, "Isolate people, but make sure you isolate the vulnerable people. Don't isolate everyone, because some people, most people, are not vulnerable to it," said Dr. Katz, maybe it's Katz, from Yale University. This is the idea that some European countries are pushing, like the Netherlands and Sweden. They've been following that. They have quarantined the vulnerable, but everyone else is free to roam, do what they want, and mix with others. And if you look at some of the pictures of Holland and Sweden, they're having a good old time over there. And actually what they call it herd immunity. The whole epidemic, this whole epidemic has been motivated by the politics of fear. You see, America was doing very well. A lot of people were happy. A lot of people liked President Trump. And some people got really unhappy about that, because it might make Donald Trump look good. He might be reelected. So you've got to have some kind of a crisis that you play up. And when people are frightened, they're really worried. They say, wow, that's a bad president. That's a bad government. The whole thing was engineered. So that's what it's all about. There was really, a crisis. But when people are frightened, you can mold them like silly putty. They're afraid. They're going to get a disease. They're going to die. We're going to be wiped out, and so on and so forth. No one really likes the COVID-19 lockdown, but I want to share a report that affirms what I believe very firmly. Jesus is on the move. As a matter of fact, he's touching many hearts. Dr. Rex Rogers, who is president of Sat7, that's a Middle East Christian satellite TV ministry, reports this. I want to quote him. Coronavirus has locked people inside their homes, but it's opening hearts to God. Lockdown and social isolation do not stop our unique satellite and online Christian programs from reaching millions of adults and children where they live. And by the way, it's in Arabic, it's in Turkic, it's in Farsi, and I think it's in one other Middle Eastern language. So millions of people in countries like Iran, Iraq, Turkey, Syria are clamoring to hear and see television programs in their own language, what it's really like to know Jesus Christ as personal Lord and Savior. Across the Middle East and North Africa, Sat7 Kids' Facebook audience has soared more than 500%. Thank God for that. Children are streaming videos that are offering encouragement and hope based on Bible passages, and this is in the Middle East. Thank God for Sat7. Sat7 reports 160,000 people watched God, Fear, and the Coronavirus, one of Sat7's mental health programs featuring church leader and psychiatrist Dr. Meher Samuel. And so they've been having a really good response to that. So the question is now, are we getting close to the end? That means the end of this age. I think we are. How close? Very close. Matthew 24:14 says, "And this gospel of the kingdom shall be preached in all the world for a witness unto all nations, and then shall the end come." It doesn't say that everybody's going to get saved. It doesn't say that at all, but it does speak about a lot of evangelistic outreach, penetrating borders with the precious gospel of Jesus Christ. Christian TV, Sat7, Zoom, and other platforms are reaching out right now all over the world. As a matter of fact, let's talk about Nick Hall and Pulse leads the Great Quarantine Revival, Good Friday 2020. You know, many churches were closed on Easter Sunday. Some did gather despite city and state ordinances. Others met online. But there is a youth-led group directed by Nick Hall. It's called Pulse. More than 100,000 people from some 40 countries affirmed that they wanted to put their faith in Jesus Christ. They had special speakers, Nick Hall, apologist Ravi Zacharias, best-selling author Max Lucado, Francis Chan, and Reverend Samuel Rodriguez, who leads a large group of Hispanic Christians in America. They also had worship by Lauren Daigle. She's tremendous, Michael W. Smith, and several others. So, wow, isn't that wonderful? Well, as I close, I've got about 2 or 3 minutes. Let's speak about the Trump Bible. Did you know that there's a Trump Bible? Some people say, what? President Trump has written the Bible? No, he hasn't written the Bible, but he has a very important Bible. In the late 1940s, 2 elderly sisters, Peggy and Christine Smith, had begun to pray for revival on the island of Lewis. It's in the Outer Hebrides, about 50 miles off the west coast of Scotland. It's a really dreary, gloomy place. If you were to take a look at that, you probably would want to be there too long. But one of the sisters was blind, and the other sister was so badly humped over with spinal stenosis that they couldn't go to church, but they had a passion for revival, and they started a prayer meeting in their cottage. So they were very, very, convinced that their little church needed revival. One of the things that really upset them, there were no young people there. They could see boys and girls, young men and women around in Scotland, but there were no young people in the church. So they persuaded their pastor to invite an evangelist named Duncan Campbell to come to their island and preach the gospel. He was pretty well known in Edinburgh. They invited him twice, and he refused. Then on the third invitation, he came. Between 1949 and 1952, revival broke out. It's called the Hebrides Revival. Now, let's talk a little bit about how President Trump fits into this. On that same island, there was a young lady by the name of Mary Ann, and she emigrated to America in 1930. She married a man by the name of Fred Trump, T-R-U-M-P. They fell in love and were married. The 2 older women, Peggy and Christine Smith, who had been praying for revival and got to see their prayers answered, sent Mary Ann a copy of the Bible that had been used in the Hebrides Revival. The Bible is now in the possession of President Trump in the Oval Office. Now, Somebody says, well, big deal. So is there any significance in this? Well, I don't want to make any bold claims. I do think it's encouraging that President Trump holds the Bible in high esteem. And he, from what I understand from insiders, he really thinks highly of this, this Bible that comes from the Hebrides revival. Has he read it? Has he looked at the notes in the margin? I really don't know. Has he felt its leather? Has he prayed over it? I don't know. But I'm an optimistic person. I think we have the right president, the right man for the office, especially in this very difficult time of America's history. So I'm praying with keen anticipation. All I can say is that Bible reminds me to pray for President Trump, and I hope the Bible is reminding him to pray for his work in America. And I think from what I hear from people like Steve Strang and other insiders that he is praying for our nation. I believe he must be. He's under a lot of heat from the left-wing Democrats. They're trying to destroy him and destroy our country. Pray for our president. Pray for our country. Friends, thank you so much for being with us. God bless you and have a wonderful weekend.